Hello and welcome to the Blessings in the Streets podcast. I am your host, Joseph B. Roberts, and in studio with me this evening, I have a young lady with me that I've known now for well over 20 years, and she is a creative soul. She has a big heart, woman of God, and she's just one of those individuals who, when she sets her mind to do something, it doesn't matter what the challenge is, what the odds are. She's going to go all in with her best efforts foot forward and just doing some great and miraculous things with her life. And she's putting her stamp out in the world, letting God use her in the way that He's created her to be utilized. So without any further delay, I appreciate her taking time out of her busy schedule to be with us today. I would love to introduce to you Miss Tia Spaulding. Thank you, Tia, for being with us this evening.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. Not a
A-
problem.
Absolutely, absolutely. So before we get into the actual nuts and bolts of the show, I do want to give you an opportunity to share with the audience a little bit about yourself, where you're from, what you do, anything that you'd like to share, just kind of give a general introduction to the audience about who you are.
Okay, well, like Joe said, I am Tia Spaulding. I am originally from Indiana, a small town in Indiana called Terre Haute. I lived in Terre Haute probably for first 23 years of my life, and then I moved to Indianapolis, and I lived in Indianapolis want to say maybe 10 years and then relocated to the Atlanta area. So I live in Metro Atlanta right now. I am currently an interior designer and I'm also a professor at a college. So yes, I am quite busy, but I do love what I do. So that's a little bit about me.
Absolutely, absolutely, and that's good stuff. And again, the audience is in for a treat tonight to find out a little bit more about your journey and what you're all about. You're doing some great work in the Atlanta area, and so that's always a good thing to celebrate and acknowledge. So, with that said, of course, you just mentioned to the audience that you're originally from Indiana, and
Hmm.
so for those who are not familiar with that Midwest life and specifically, growing up in Terre Haute,
Hmm.
Indiana, you know, if you would just kind of share with us what was it like for you coming up? Any fond memories that comes to mind, as well as just if, of course, if there was any challenges that you had to deal with in coming
Hmm.
up, kind of give us the backdrop of what that life was like in the beginnings for you coming up.
Hmm. Well, again, we grew up in a small town. It was pretty much everybody knew everybody. And if you didn't know someone in particular, you knew their family. So all they had to do was mention a name, and it's like, okay, I know your brother, your cousin, or your uncle, or someone. So we grew up in a very, very small town. It was a lot of love there. We grew up in an era where you could get in trouble by the village. So you could be where you weren't supposed to be, and somebody in the village would be able to get on you for that. And things have changed. You can't do that anymore these days. But we definitely had those people that always looked out for us. One of the things that are my most fondest memories was the time that I got to spend with my grandmother. So my grandmother was the heart of our family. She was the glue that held everything together. So my grandmother had 8 kids. So I had a lot of cousins, and I had 5 uncles and 2 aunts. And then my mother makes the eight. And so we grew up in a close knit family, again, centered around my grandmother. She was disabled, so she really couldn't do much, but what she did do had a profound impact on us. And, she didn't have a lot of money because, again, she was disabled, so she was on a fixed income. So, growing up and getting older and maturing, I realized some of the best gifts that she could have ever given us was her wisdom. You can't put a price on that. So, her just telling us stories, uplifting us, those are some of the best memories that I have growing up. Again, going for the summer, we might be at her house for like 2 weeks in the summer with our cousins. Those were our first best friends. So, again, we had lots of fun growing up. We grew up poor. We did not, I don't remember knowing we were poor as a child. I don't think I started to realize that we were poor until maybe once I got in middle school and I started to see other people around me that had more than what we had. But growing up as a child, we were always around family, so we didn't know any better. So there were definitely those hard times growing up poor where maybe there wasn't enough to go around. So we always had food. Thank God, we always had food. But I do remember times when we would come home and maybe the lights were off. Again, we didn't quite understand why that was the case. And I don't ever remember my mother sitting down and having a discussion with us that kind of explained why it was. She would just give us some reason, and we never really thought much about it. But I grew up around a lot of strong women. And even though I had five uncles, three of those uncles lived in other states. So I would see them when they would come and visit. So I was mainly around my mother, her sisters, my grandmother's sisters. So I was around a lot of strong women that were single mothers. So I saw a lot of women raising children on their own. It wasn't always easy to watch them because, there were times we would see them cry. Maybe we didn't know why they were crying. But once you get older, you realize maybe they were crying because they didn't know, how they were going to buy presents for Christmas or, how they were going to put food on the table. So we definitely grew up poor. But again, I don't feel like we lost anything or we were without anything because we had a lot of love between our family. So that would be a little bit about me growing up in that small town. One of the things I'll say also about that is my family was very emotional. So I grew up in this type of family where when they see each other, they're hugging, they're kissing each other on the cheek. They get to reminiscing and then someone start crying and it's just like, okay, they're very emotional. And I always felt like I didn't fit in with that because it seemed a little weird to me that, people would just start crying at the drop of a hat. And then you're coming in and you're this child and somebody's coming in hot, to kiss you on the cheek. And I'm just like, ew, 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 no. So it was a little weird when it comes to that because, again, I felt like I didn't fit in. But the older that I have gotten, the more I appreciate that now. You don't understand it when you're younger, but as you go through life, you go through challenges in life, you realize how precious those moments really were, especially once you start to lose some of those family members and they pass on. You have those memories that stick with you in your head. And again, you may have felt weirded out when you were a child, but now that they're gone, you're like, I wish I could go back to those times and not feel so weird, but actually appreciate those moments. So that's a little bit about my childhood growing up.
Okay, that's really good. And a few things that you touched on, really started to trigger some memories of of my own. Of course, talking about the presence of the grandmother.
Hmm.
I grew up with my grandmother in the home, and that was like one of my best friends. I mean,
Hmm.
just from time spent and like you said, the stories.
Hmm.
Some of them were wisdom stories. Some of them were just stories from back in the day, and
Hmm.
I appreciated it more as I got older because I can remember having friends that would come over and she get to telling them stories too,
Hmm.
and next thing you know they were all captivated, and they forgot about the fact that they were here to come get me to go outside and play. They were interested in the next story that was being told, and just so having that presence of the grandmother in your life is a powerful thing. And then of course you
Hmm.
talked about the village, and again, unless you were a kid who say like us, grew up in the 70s, and you understand about how you could get, like you stated, how you can get in trouble or you can get addressed about something you had no business doing from somebody else that wasn't necessarily a biological parent or relative or whatever, but it was just people looking out for one another. And we just don't have that anymore. And then,
Absolutely.
and the one of the last things that you said that I thought was really powerful, and you spoke about, how at first it was a little weird about the whole emotional factor. You have times today where people, who are possibly in therapy, going through some really deep emotional scars, if you will, depression, if you will, when they speak about never experiencing the hug of a parent.
Hmm.
You know, my mother or my father never hugged me. They never kissed me. They never
Hmm.
told me that they loved me. You know, and like you said, we went through that kind of thing, and we maybe didn't fully appreciate the value in that. But then when you hear some people who went without it, and you understand how they've been scarred by not
Hmm.
feeling emotion, and as you stated, as those individuals who used to give that to you have passed on or what have you, you miss it. You know, the
Mhm.
thing that you used to be
Mhm.
like, why is aunt such and such or uncle such and such coming up, and it wasn't anything of a perverted nature or anything. It was
Right.
just a genuine, I'm loving on you. We were very touchy feely in
Mhm.
that time, but it was an act of love. It was an act of just letting you know that I care, and and I appreciate you, that I'm wanting to console you, that I'm wanting to make you feel better about whatever the situation is that you're going through. Now you fast forward in today's times, and a simple touch, a simple thing of that nature, whether you're doing it amongst yourselves or in a workplace setting or whatever. Now it can be viewed as something
Mhm.
inappropriate or illegal, even, and,
Mhm.
and that's not even the intention. It's just, hey, it's just who I am. And so
Mhm.
now to have to control or be mindful of how you express yourself or things of that nature, is just kind of weird how just the time has changed things. So a lot of what you spoke to is, again, triggers those memories, but it's also a lost thing that we have in our communities and in our families, that
Mhm.
our young folks now, they don't even realize, what they've missed out on. And the only shot that they have is if they come up with in households where the parents and the other family members are still in that old school
Mhm.
mindset,
Yep.
and they still carry on that tradition. I know we do,
Mhm.
in our home. So it's like, my daughter knows that she's going to hear me say, I love you, or get a hug, or anything like that. It's not a weird thing to
Mhm.
have, so I'm glad
Very
you brought
important.
that up. So as we talk about, your journey of life, of course, you gave us a very thorough background of the beginnings part of it. And I think that's important for us to speak to that in order to really understand, how things transform as you get older and we begin to experience different challenges and obstacles. So we're going to go another level. And in this level, I want to ask you, you think back to, as you're moving along through life, there's going to come some time at some point, you live long enough where you're going to face something, or a series of some things over life, depending upon how long you're blessed with that life,
Mhm.
that
Mhm.
that challenge, that obstacle, that moment of adversity is going to hit a little bit different. There's going to
Mhm.
be some things that 9 times out of 10, you're able to navigate through and work that thing out no matter what it is. But then every now and then you get hit with something that it weighs a little bit more. The burden
Mhm.
is a little bit heavier, and you start to, for the first time maybe, or in a rare moment, you start to actually question,
Mhm.
I don't know if I'm gonna be able to make it through this. This is
Mhm.
this is a bit much, even for me. I'm so tough. I'm so
Mhm.
good at navigating stuff. So if you would tell us about a time when you faced a situation like that, where when it hit different. It hit in a way where you started to question, like, how am I going to make it through this? I don't know. You were doubting. Obviously, you're here today, so we know
Mhm.
that you made it through whatever it is that you're about to share with us. But if you would kind of walk us through what that situation was like for you and what you had to do to be able to overcome it.
Absolutely. So it's funny that you say that, we are strong and we normally deal with things very easily, and then sometimes something happens that rocks you to your core. And I've always been someone that's been very resilient. So I've been through a lot of things in life, and I often can say that some of the things that I've been through in life would probably bring other people to their knees, but somehow, some way, I always fought through and pushed through those situations. But there was one thing in particular that I would say, in repeating what I just said, rocked me to my core and actually brought me to a place where I knew I wasn't okay. So it was very unfamiliar to me because, again, everything that I've kind of been through in life, I was able to fight it off, or deal with it in a way where it didn't break me. It didn't break me. It may have hurt. There may have been some tears and some things like that, but I pushed through and I got over it. But this particular situation again was one of those things where it's like, this is heavy and I don't know that I'm okay. And that was, was married. I was actually married for 15 years, and we started to have issues in our marriage. And it was one of those things where at first it was, oh, marriage is tough. Everybody has problems. And so we kind of pushed through some of those things, some of the things that a lot of people go through when they're raising kids and, finances and things like that. But then there was a moment where my husband became someone that I didn't recognize. And he was going through journey that I'm assuming he had to go on. But in this journey that he was on, and I'm very respectful with the words that I choose, because I feel like I can tell the story without needing to mudsling or anything like that. But he had an obvious journey that he needed to go on. But in his journey and in his path of going through these things, he did a lot of things that were very hurtful. And I feel like it was a situation where I went to bed one night, he was one person. I woke up the next morning and it felt like the invasion of body snatchers had come, snatched him, and left someone that looked like him and sounded like him, but was clearly not behaving like the man that I had fallen in love with and spent my life with. And so I started to wonder what could it be that he's going through. And I'm a big researcher, so I love to, if anything, if I'm ever questioning anything or I'm looking for an answer, I do pray, of course, obviously. And maybe that prayer leads me to some of the information that I find when I do my research. So I started to read about midlife crisis. And some people don't believe in midlife crisis. And at first, when I first started to read about it, I was like, oh, he's not out buying a sports car. He didn't dye his hair blonde, what little hair he had. He didn't dye it blonde. You see it in the movies and it's always, very entertaining. But the more I started to see that it was definitely more psychological, definitely sort of an identity crisis, a situation of feeling like you've reached a point in your life and maybe you've made some great decisions, maybe you've accomplished a few things, but you feel like your life has been wasted. Like you reach a certain age and you're like, okay, I'm in my 40s and I haven't done all of the things that I wanted to do. And so it leads you down a path of destruction. So for me, watching him go through this path of destruction became unbearable because you care about someone and you love someone and you're watching them slowly destroy their life. And not only destroy their life, but when you're married, what they do affects you. So then it starts to destroy your life. So I spent all of this time reading and all of this time researching, and I said, okay, I'm going to fight for my marriage. So I was very, very committed to fighting for my marriage. And as time passed, it was one thing after another. Nothing was getting better. So I remember one day looking in the mirror and I didn't even recognize myself anymore. Okay. I was a shell of the person that I had known myself to be. I I was just losing weight and probably hair and everything because again, I'm stressing and trying to get this man to get his stuff together. And I sat and I thought to myself, I've been trying to save my marriage by myself. Okay. And you can't save a marriage by yourself. So I decided in that moment, since I've given him every opportunity to work on this together, I'm going to save myself now. And I committed myself to therapy. And I first approached him with it and said, would you like to go to therapy together? Well, he didn't want to hear anything about it. He didn't want to do it because, of course, when you go to therapy, that causes you to admit that there's some things going on. So I put myself in therapy. And through therapy, I was able to get to a place and really commit to that. Okay, it's time for you to save yourself. You care about him. You definitely don't want to see him doing these things or, destroying his life. But at the end of the day, the only person that you have control over is yourself. So it's time for you to stop fighting for him. It's time for you to stop trying to save him and fight for and save yourself. So that is what I started to do. I kept going through therapy. I started to do things for myself, just go out and just do small things for myself because, again, I had lost myself. So now I'm at a point where I'm like, I've got to figure out who I am, who I am in this moment, who I want to be in the future. And so that's what I did. I went through therapy, subsequently filed for a divorce. We got a divorce, and I continued on my path of therapy. Because again, when you go through a divorce or an end of a relationship that has been a long term relationship, you go through a grieving process. The grieving process is similar to a death. So when someone loses someone close to them, I know you are definitely familiar with that. There are stages of the grieving process that you go through. And the end of a relationship can certainly feel like a death. And so I went through all of those phases of the grieving process. And I gave myself grace enough to allow myself to feel. Now, one of the things that therapy helped me with was, this goes back to me saying that when I grew up, I felt like my family was emotional and I didn't fit in. I didn't feel like I was a very emotional person. And most of my life, I haven't been. But one of the things that therapy taught me to do is respect my feelings. So when I feel something, allow myself to feel it, know that it's okay. I'm a human, I'm not a robot. And to allow myself to process those feelings and then work through whatever it is that I need to work through in that moment to get to a better place. So that is exactly what I did. I committed to therapy, committed to, again, going on a journey for myself. So in retrospect, what happened is he went on his own journey. Okay. And in turn of him going on his own journey, it placed me on a journey. Now, not a journey that I asked to be placed on, because I would have never asked for that. But it was still a gift. So I am grateful for the fact that even though I was placed on a journey that I didn't ask to be placed on, that I respected the process of that journey, and I allowed myself to receive that gift, because in that gift of me going on my own journey, there was a lot of beautiful things that happened. So that would be probably one of the hardest things that I ever went through in my life, to the point where, again, I don't think I've ever been so knocked off of the even, platform that I'm normally on, except for going through that.
Wow, wow. I want to first, of course, start off by saying I appreciate your transparency and sharing that. I know that that's not an easy story to tell, and so, but it's a necessary story to tell, and I do
Absolutely.
believe that somebody's going to be blessed in hearing what you had to say, because there's a number of different things that we need to unpack from what you said that is so important. I think first off, just understanding the impact of divorce,
Hmm.
for people who've never gone through that. The way I've described it, and I've had the unfortunate pleasure
Hmm.
of experiencing that myself in the past. And you know when you talk about the whole spirit of what marriage is, and you talk about the two becoming one,
Hmm.
if you want to know what that feels like in a verbiage type of way, it's literally like, even though we know that as husband and wife you're not physically one person,
Hmm.
when that divorce happens, it literally feels like you're being ripped apart
Hmm.
from somebody, even though physically we know that that's not what's happening. But
Hmm.
that's what it feels like emotionally. That's what it feels like mentally. And
Hmm.
you're, like you said, man or woman, you're just not in a good place with that. I don't
Hmm.
care how much you might try to front and look like it doesn't bother you, whatever, but it hits different. It's more than just the, I break up with you, I
Right.
quit you.
Hmm.
It's not that. It's different. And then, of course, if there's been significant time invested, as was the case in your situation,
Hmm.
time, kids involved,
Hmm.
all kind of experiences and things of that nature, it becomes very difficult. And of course, I've had the pleasure of knowing who your husband was, and actually seeing it from the beginning. So
Hmm.
I know that how important it was to you, and that this wasn't just some random type of thing. I mean, so just to give it to perspective to those who don't know and what that experience was like. So we're talking about a very special situation where it was almost fairy tale like,
Hmm.
and then for that to be like that, and then boom, like you said, one minute I see this person going to bed, and then the next minute I wake up and it's like somebody totally different.
Hmm.
So that's one thing I wanted to point out. And then I like the fact that, aside from the fact that you, of course, in telling your story, didn't make it about a mudslinging moment or anything like
Hmm.
that, because as you stated, that's not necessary to actually tell
Right.
the story. What I did like about what you said was that you also didn't make it about him.
Right.
I think sometimes when we talk about divorce, it's always, the husband is blaming the wife for everything, and
Hmm.
the wife is
Hmm.
blaming the husband for everything. But
Hmm.
you took accountability, not so much in terms of what he was dealing with, but you took accountability of yourself. You
Right.
said, I realized, I looked in that mirror that one day, and it clicked to me. I don't recognize her. She's not who I'm supposed to be. And even that, when you're not who you are, if you're talking about, your will to fight for the marriage and to give it all, how can you? If you're no longer, you don't even have it in you to fight. So you had to make that decision. And it was what my stepdad used to refer to. You chose healthy selfishness, where you said, I got to get me right. And which is more important than this marriage, even if it means it has to go to a divorce. If it means me separating and being by myself, I have to do that to begin the healing process of me. And so that was huge that you made that acknowledgement and then took proactive steps to move in that direction. So it was like, hey, I committed to therapy, and I don't know if this was your first time doing therapy or not, but as you know, history has always been, in particular with Black community, we've been very anti-therapy. That's for crazy folks. That's for, all that kind of thing. And even with your husband, he was resistant to it, I'm sure, for those very reasons, because it was a taboo thing. But, seeing you go through it and having personally, tried therapy myself for the first time in the past year, I used to have those same thoughts about it until you experience it and you realize, how significant it is and how it allows you to, as you stated, to respect your feelings. If you're angry, be angry. If you're sad, be sad. If you're frustrated, be frustrated. The key is, and I'm sure your therapist probably shared this with you, as I know mine did with me, is that you just can't stay stuck there.
Right. Absolutely.
Get it out, and then you kind of catch your breath, okay, now that I got this out of me, what's the plan moving forward? How do I again begin to unlock that healing process? What's my next steps moving forward to, becoming myself again? Identifying who I am. And I've seen, as I said at the top of the show, about your creative side really went into full bloom as you were going through this journey. So here you are doing your thing with your interior design and your teaching and all those things. And yeah, why you would have preferred not to have gone through this journey to get to that, it was a calling was being suppressed within you because you had not addressed something that actually went back as far as childhood when you started talking about the emotional part. So sometimes what God does is he has to shatter your world. It doesn't always feel good in the shattering of it, but sometimes he has to just kind of blow it all up for you to hear him, to stop trying to do it. Like, as you stated, I kept trying to do it all on my own and not acknowledging that I needed help, that this was bigger than me. You surrendered, you got the help, not only physically in terms of the therapist, but you got the help spiritually in talking to God and just allowing him to navigate you through this. So I think those are all key components to your healing and just to your overall, again, identifying who you are, who is the real. It's like, will the real Tia Spaulding please stand up? Who is she? And now, the world is wide open. And again, it's not that you don't care. It's not that you don't love anymore. It's not that you don't, that you dismiss, you acknowledge, hey, he had a journey. I have a journey. And, I had to do what I had to do. He has to do what he has to do.
Absolutely.
The door is even still open, in all truthfulness, for reconciliation.
Absolutely.
Just on the basis of you taking time to work on you. And if, of course, if he does the same thing and that's something that he ultimately wants, there's still that possibility. So even in divorce, I want people to understand that, because in these days and times, people can get into just one little snippy little argument and then it's like, I'm done with this marriage. They're so quick to end marriages instead of trying to fight for them. But you got to also know, even in your fight for your marriage, you also have to know, okay, if I'm gonna walk away, I need to walk away knowing that I left it all on the table. I did everything I could to try to do my part in that, and I think you did that.
I did, absolutely.
But then you didn't just stop it and then just jump into something else.
Right.
You said, no, I have to go through a healing process, because even if you never reconcile in marriage, if you were to go on to find someone else, what good are you if you haven't healed from the last?
Absolutely.
Then you bring in that damage to a new situation that might be great for you, but it'll be stained, it'll be destroyed because you never healed from the previous. You didn't take those measures. You didn't go through that work that you needed to do.
Absolutely.
And so a lot of times we miss that too because of our fear of being alone. I don't want to be by myself, so I jump into something else before I've had a chance to heal. And in turn, I tarnish or I damage what could have possibly been even a better situation. So
Hmm.
all of those things that you mentioned, I think are very powerful. And I'm hoping that our listeners are tuned into that. And like I said, if somebody has a chance to listen to this and they're going through a marital problems, or perhaps they've even, gone as far as divorce and they're trying to
Hmm.
figure out where do I go from here, please take heed to some of the messaging that Tia has shared, because it's very valuable, it's very important, and don't miss that.
Right.
You have to be right before you can engage in any kind of relationship with anybody or anything. And then, of course, you can't forget the God factor in it, because if
Absolutely.
He's not in it, if God is not a part of your marriage, if God is not a part of your finances, if God is not a part of any relationship you have with anything or anybody, you kind of have to expect
Hmm.
that's going to be a struggle for you, because
Absolutely.
you're trying to do too much on your own, and we
Hmm.
just weren't built for that. So
That's so true. So
that's
true.
that's, that's good stuff. That's good stuff. So Tia, I want to ask you, when you think about just challenges and adversities in general, again, whether it's something as big as what you spoke of, or even if it's just the small stuff, I'm curious to know, what is your process that you like to go through if today is one of those days that adversity is knocking on the door and it's okay, here I am to mess with you. What is it that you like to do? How do you kind of process dealing with challenging times? Kind of share with us what your regimen or your routine is that works for you.
Yes. So in the past, I would say that when adversity would happen or something challenging would happen in my life, my first reaction was just to push through it. So again, not allowing myself to feel some of the emotions that may come with that, and probably just shutting all of that down, and just like a robot, just going through the motions. But now through therapy and learning how to respect my feelings and feel those things, and again, like you said, not stay there. You feel the feelings, and then you've got to figure out what's next. You can't just stay paused in that moment. Now I do a lot of meditation. I of course pray, because I will say that even as we were talking about my divorce and the things that we went through, things I went through in my marriage, I would have not come out on the other side if it wasn't for faith, and if it wasn't for praying. And even though, I spoke about therapy, therapy was great, but it was me praying and asking God to show me what it was that I needed to do. And in his answer, it led me to therapy. And my therapist is actually a faith-based therapist. So having that and being able to go and get that help from her, but then her also pour the word into you at the same time has helped. So with the therapy, the meditation, and then journaling. Journaling is something that I have found. I used to do it a lot when I was younger. So when I was younger and in high school and even a little bit in college, journaling was a thing, and we would write things down. So one of the things my therapist suggested, was me to pick that back up. So when I go through anything challenging, I might take a moment, and I will get a quiet space. Maybe practicing deep breathing, or again a little bit of meditation, and then pull out my journal and put my thoughts onto paper. Because sometimes when you've got all of that chaos going on in your head, you can't really make sense of things. But if you write things down and you just get it all out, sometimes that's all you really need to do is just cleanse that all out of you. Then you're in a better place mentally to be able to decide, okay, how do I need to tackle this? So again, meditation, prayer, and then journaling. Those are the things that I am doing now. And then just taking those moments for self-care. Because again, sometimes we can get so busy caring for everybody else that we
Hmm.
forget to take time for ourselves. So even just again, something simple as, curling up to a book, or maybe taking a walk, and just taking those moments for myself now, that helps as well. So journaling, meditating, praying, and then self-care.
I love that. I love that. And again, mainly because you offer both perspectives of it. You said this is what I do when I'm faced with the situation, but then by incorporating the self care part of it, that lets me know that you're not waiting for something to go wrong before you start loving on
Mm-hmm.
you.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's what people also need to understand when you're talking about how do I properly battle the storms, the valley experiences of life, is it's an ongoing process. So
Mm-hmm.
nothing has to be going wrong today for you to
Mm-hmm.
be preparing for something going wrong, because
Mm-hmm.
the storms are going to come. The thing is we don't know when, and we
Mm-hmm.
don't know what level of intensity it's going to come at. It's not like the weatherman can come on TV and say, hey,
Mm-hmm.
today is going to be showers this afternoon or whatever. We don't have that luxury. So you got to stay prayed up. You got to stay worded up. You got to be doing things that prepare you. So when it hits, even though it comes unannounced, you're not thrown off your feet to the point where you're consumed by it. You're able to withstand the hit. You're able to process it properly in a healthy manner. And then you'll have the fortitude and understanding of, hey, but from your faith perspective, locking arms with God and allowing Him
Mm-hmm.
to be your eyes and ears as you navigate your way through that situation, so that you're doing it with a clear focus and clear mind, and in a way that's in alignment with how He would have you do it. So you're not overreacting or going to one extreme or another in a reckless sort of way. You're able to
Mm-hmm.
help in a healthy manner process the challenge that you're up against. Again, whether it's something very small, because if we go too crazy on something small, it becomes big.
Mm-hmm.
And then if we minimize our efforts on something big, we can make it blow up even more than what it needed to be. So,
Absolutely.
and so that's really good that you pointed that out. So with that said, if you had an opportunity to speak to, you know, young Tia, the Tia, say, of 20 years ago, the Tia who, doesn't, hadn't had the experiences that you've had now, haven't had those lessons learned that you know now, the maturity, the understanding about life. If you had a chance to speak to her, or even somebody who was probably like her and thinking like her back in that time,
Mm-hmm.
what would be your words of wisdom that you would have to offer that you think would be essential in helping young Tia or somebody like her to be able to navigate and work through challenging and difficult times in life?
I would tell her to one, to lean into her faith. And I would also tell her you are enough. You are enough. You are valuable. You are worthy, and that you're worthy to be loved. Love yourself first, and you cannot seek from someone else what you should already have within yourself. So you can't go out and look for someone to validate you. You've got to validate yourself. You can't search for happiness in people, places, and things. Happiness is something that is a gift that you have within yourself, that you create for yourself. So you've got to be in a place where you're valuing yourself, you're loving yourself, you are realizing that you're worthy, and that would have helped me. If I'm speaking to my younger self, that would have helped me make some better decisions than some of the decisions I've made in the past. But even with that, the one thing that I can say is, even though I would tell her that, or I would tell someone that was maybe, similar to me in that time frame, some of the things that I have gone through, even though I could have done some things differently, some of the things that I've gone through, I will say, has helped me become the woman that I am today. And so I'm a strong believer in your past doesn't have to dictate your future. So you may have done some things in the past that you're not proud of. You may have gone through some things in the past that you weren't happy that you went through. But that doesn't mean that that has to be what is going to be in your future. You can create your own future. Like you said, it's wide open. You can do whatever it is that you set your mind to. So yes, I made some bad decisions. But again, I know that some of those things I've gone through, some of those adversities, some of those, difficult moments have helped me become the person that I am today. So although I didn't choose to go through those things, I'm grateful because, for one, I know God doesn't make mistakes. And I know that sometimes we have to go through certain things to get us to a different level in life.
Absolutely, absolutely. And I love the fact that you pointed it out that, I'm not sitting here saying that if I could turn back the hands of time, that I
Hmm.
wish none of those things would have
Hmm.
happened that happened. You're just saying I would have loved to have been able to handle them differently.
Absolutely.
But we don't want to discard what's happened, because if it happened, whether we want to call it good or whether we want to call it bad, we really shouldn't be labeling it in any way. It's the journey.
Right.
And as you stated, God doesn't make mistakes. So none of those things can take place in our lives if God doesn't allow it to happen. Does it mean if He allows these challenging times to happen that He's trying to hurt us, or trying to make things rough? No. It's
Hmm.
just He understands that sometimes things have to take place the way that they do in order to get us to ultimate place where, again, that he created us to walk in, that space,
Right.
that place that he designed specifically for us, that path to walk on. We have to go through what we go through. We just, over time, we learn that when those challenging moments come,
Mm-hmm.
if we're walking in faith and we're following him and we're understanding, the whole dynamics of it all, we just we work it out better than what we would have had, let's just say, in the
Absolutely.
past.
Absolutely.
When those challenging moments come, maybe in the past we used to freak out about it. Now we have more of a sense of calm and
Mm-hmm.
focus. In the past, we might have, panicked and went into this depressive state and whined and moaned and moped for days and weeks and months. And now, we don't do that anymore. And in time, if we continue to persevere and work at it, we'll get so good at it that you won't even know
Mm-hmm.
that we've gone through or been through anything, because not because we're covering it up, but because
Mm-hmm.
we've just mastered our walk through it.
Mm-hmm.
We just don't we don't sweat it anymore.
Mm-hmm.
We respect what it is, but we work it out. And you wouldn't know unless we sat up here and told you, yeah, did you know
Mm-hmm.
I had no idea. Well, you really
Mm-hmm.
weren't supposed to have any idea, because it was how my maturity and my faith has allowed me to handle it better. I
Mm-hmm.
process it differently.
Mm-hmm.
So that's a sign of spiritual growth in you,
Mm-hmm.
to be at that in that place. So good stuff, good stuff. So before I let you go, I do, of course, want to take this opportunity to celebrate you, to
Thank you.
affirm you, to love on you. So if you got anything that you got going on, projects that you're working on, anything exciting that's taking place now, or you got in the future that's coming up that you'd like to share, please do that with us. Because again, we want to celebrate that and acknowledge you on that.
Well, I'm of course still focusing on interior design, but I'm also I can't say everything, but I'm also working on some lifestyle content and lifestyle brands in or a lifestyle brand, not brands in the future, but maybe it will become brands. Maybe I'm speaking something into existence here. So working on some lifestyle content and things like that. So that's kind of where I want to go in the future. Still focusing on interior design, but also bringing some other aspects of lifestyle in the viewpoint of someone my age, a female my age and older. So those are some of the things that I'm working on. And again, just continuing to keep myself motivated and prayed up and, writing in my journal, all of those things.
That's
That's
awesome.
me going forward.
That's awesome. Well, we definitely want to celebrate and acknowledge that, and and what you're working on and what your vision is, because those visions don't just get placed on anybody. That's an anointing.
Absolutely.
That is a calling on your life. So I'm just going to speak it into existence right now, that
Thank
whatever it
you.
is that you're working on, that you've envisioned, that God will supply everything that you need and give you the direction and the guidance that is necessary to bring it into fruition. And I'll be looking forward. I know you with your interior design. I'm be looking forward to the Tia Spaulding collection.
Okay.
And
Thank you.
and maybe one day we'll flip on some HGTV and see the
We'll
Tia Spaulding
see. We'll
show.
see. We'll
We might as
see.
well, we might as well go big or go home. We just throw it
That's
all
right.
out there. So
That's right.
you're
You'll be
doing
the
some.
first to know.
Absolutely, absolutely. So you're doing some good things, and again, I can't think of a better person to experience that opportunity to do so. So, with that said, I thank you so much for again taking
Thanks for
time
having
out
me.
to be with me today, and the sharing of your story. It's definitely been powerful, and I've been blessed by it. And I know anybody that's having an opportunity to listen to this episode is going to be equally as blessed as well, because you were just very authentic and very
Hmm.
genuine in sharing that, and a lot of stuff to unpack, a lot of lessons to immediately be able to
Hmm.
apply in individuals' lives, male or female. It doesn't even matter. So I thank you so much for doing that. And for those who are tuning in, if you've enjoyed the content that has been shared today, please subscribe, please share, please comment, please like. Because here at the podcast, our Blessings in the Streets podcast, this is what we do. It's all about encouraging, inspiring, uplifting, and just instilling the necessary knowledge, if you will, of understanding that no matter what challenges you go through, we're going to all go through stuff. But again, it doesn't have to be the end of your story. And don't fret just because you're going through. Don't look at it as a bad thing. It may be a difficult road to travel, and that's okay. That's just part of life. But it is there for a reason. It is there to shape you. It is there to mold you. It is there to grow you. Think of it as your spiritual workout, if you will. It means that God is working on something in your life. He's trying to lead you to something great. So, when you're going through challenging times, that's not a time to be sad about it, but just to be optimistic that, hey, something big is coming down the pike, and I need to be as clear minded and open and as possible to what he has to say to me and how he wants me to go. And then once that's clear, I just need to go. I just need to do it without fear, without worry, because he would have never put that vision on my heart if it was not something that he intended for me to walk in and trust that he's going to be with me all the way in that. So with that said, here at the Blessings in the Streets podcast, always remember that this is the place where your story is your glory, where your relationships are relevant, and where your journey is your joy. I am your host, Joseph B. Roberts. Thank you for tuning in. And until next time, God bless. Take care. Keep persevering. Keep fighting that good fight. And just trusting God to lead you through any and everything that you're up against, because nothing is too big for him. Take care of yourselves.